I wasn't looking for anything that morning. I was just doing laundry, the most ordinary chore in the world, when my entire life split in half. The receipt slipped out of Cole's navy blazer like it had been waiting for me. A single piece of paper, lightly creased, smelling faintly of his Dior cologne. At first I thought it was one of his work expenses. But then I saw it, printed clear as daylight. The Plaza Hotel, deluxe suite, 1 night, 2 guests. Dated exactly on the evening he told me, "I'll be home late, sweetheart, new client dinner." My heart didn't stop, it didn't race. It simply changed rhythm. 61 years of instincts hummed inside me, and every one of them whispered the same word. No, it couldn't be. Could it? The sunlight through my kitchen window hit the gold logo on the receipt, making it glint like a warning. I stood there, holding proof of a world I didn't know I was living in, while my Starbucks coffee went cold on the counter beside my MacBook Air, the same laptop where I'd helped Cole polish his resume just months before. I swallowed hard, steadying myself against the marble edge of the island. I told myself to breathe. Then I told myself to stop being naive. When the door opened, I nearly dropped the receipt. Cole walked in humming, swinging his iPhone onto the sofa like a man who'd never lied a day in his life. His hair was freshly gelled, shirt crisp, the faintest trace of cologne still clinging to him. "Hey babe," he said, planting a quick kiss on my cheek. "Laundry day, huh?" I stared at him, the receipt tucked behind my back. Found something unexpected." He chuckled as he poured sparkling water into a Tiffany tumbler I bought him last Christmas. Probably one of my old parking tickets. I swear New York hates me. A tiny bitter laugh almost slipped out. If only it were a parking ticket. He didn't notice the way my eyes followed him. The looseness in his smile, the spring in his step, the way he double-checked his phone screen when he thought I wasn't watching. I saw everything now, like someone had cleaned the fog off my glasses and turned the world sharp again. "You look tired," he said, glancing at me with that polished concern he wore like a tailored suit. I forced a small smile. "Just thinking." Cole kissed my forehead and headed to the shower. The moment I heard the water run, I pulled out the receipt again. My fingers trembled once, only once, before the shaking stopped. I wasn't the kind of woman who crumbled easily. Widowhood had taught me that. Raising myself back up from loneliness had taught me that. Making the mistake of loving a younger man taught me that too. I placed the receipt on the counter and flattened it gently. My reflection in the microwave door looked older. Not because of age, but because truth ages you faster than time ever will. I whispered to myself, "You don't run from this, you find the truth." The water shut off. Cole stepped out, towel around his waist. "What should we do for dinner?" he asked casually. "Let's see," I replied, folding the receipt into my cardigan pocket. "We'll decide later." But I had already made a decision. Tomorrow I would follow the truth, wherever it led, whatever it cost, however deeply it cut. Because nothing hurts more than a lie you believed in. And nothing strengthens a woman like a truth she finally stops running from. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind kept returning to the receipt, glowing in my thoughts like a neon sign I didn't ask for. The next morning, I found myself staring at Cole's empty side of the bed, still warm, still smelling of Dior, still lying to me. I rose slowly, joints aching in that familiar way that comes with age and heartbreak, and poured myself a cup of Starbucks coffee, strong enough to wake a small village. I wasn't ready to confront him, not yet, but I also couldn't carry the truth alone. So I called Julia. She arrived in 24 minutes, wearing sunglasses too big for her face and holding a paper bag of pastries like she was entering a crime scene. "Where's the body?" she asked as she kicked the door shut behind her. "There is no body," I said. "There will be if you keep dating younger men," she muttered, dropping her coat on a chair. I handed her the receipt. She scanned it, eyebrows rising higher and higher until I thought they might leave her forehead entirely. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, placing a hand dramatically over her heart. "A deluxe suite? Men don't book rooms like this for business. They book them when they want flattering lighting." Despite everything, I let out a small laugh. It felt good, like the first breath after being underwater too long. Julia took a big bite of a chocolate croissant, powdered sugar dusting the front of her blouse. "Okay, we need a plan. First question, has he been acting strange?" I hesitated. He showers twice a day now. He never did that before. Honey, she said, brushing crumbs off her chest, a man only showers twice a day when either a doctor tells him to, or a mistress does. I covered my face with my hands. Julia, she patted my shoulder gently. I'm sorry. Too soon? Yes. Okay, I'll ease up, she said, immediately failing as she added, but seriously, we're dealing with a walking cliché wearing your husband's face. We sat at the kitchen island with my MacBook Air open between us. Julia insisted on checking our bank statements for anomalies. I hated how easily she said that word. Here, she said, pointing at a string of transactions. These restaurants. You've never been to them, right? I shook my head. He said they were work dinners. Julia raised one eyebrow in a way that should be illegal at her age. Work dinners don't happen at candlelit wine bars with names missing vowels. She scrolled again, eyes widening. Look, another charge at the plaza last month. My stomach dropped. Another one? She reached for my hand, her voice softening. Sweetheart, I know this hurts, but you need to see the pattern. I looked at the glowing screen. Each charge felt like a bruise forming under my skin. Just then, Cole walked into the kitchen, hair still wet from the shower, humming like a man whose world was perfectly intact. Morning, ladies, he said cheerfully, rummaging in the fridge. You're up early. Julia didn't blink. I'm always up early when justice calls. He stared at her. What does that mean? She took a sip of her latte. Yoga, she lied with flawless confidence. He nodded slowly, suspicious but clueless, and walked back toward the bedroom. When he was out of earshot, Julia grabbed my wrist. We're following him today. What? I whispered. We're doing reconnaissance. We're 60. And therefore invisible, she said, eyes gleaming. Men never notice women our age unless we block the TV. I snorted, covering my mouth to hide the laugh. We finished our coffees, grabbed our coats, and by late morning, we were sitting inside Julia's Toyota, parked 3 blocks from Cole's office. Julia had binoculars in her lap, tiny, pastel pink ones she bought during a phase she called her crime documentary era. You don't have to use those, I whispered. They're noticeable. Not as noticeable as his betrayal, she said, rolling down her window. And for the first time since finding the receipt, I felt something unexpected. A flicker of strength. I wasn't just a woman being deceived. I was a woman ready to see the truth, even if it hurt. We didn't have to wait long before Cole walked out of the building. He wasn't rushing, just strolling, relaxed shoulders, spring in his step, humming like a man whose conscience had the weekend off. He adjusted his collar twice, which Julia immediately noted. There, she whispered, tapping my arm. Collar touching, classic sign. Sign of what? I asked. Sign of guilt, she said. Or indigestion, but based on context, definitely guilt. We followed him from a distance. Julia insisted on walking behind a delivery man, pushing a cart full of Amazon boxes for camouflage. It worked until she tripped over one of the wheels, apologized to the cart, and then hissed at me. Okay, that cart was too slow anyway. Cole turned right toward Central Park South, and my stomach tightened. He paused at a storefront window, fixing his hair in the glass like a young man heading to a date he didn't deserve. Julia leaned closer to me. A married man doesn't check his reflection that much unless he's about to lie or propose, and I doubt we're getting a proposal today. I sighed, half in pain, half in disbelief. Then she appeared. Sienna stepped out of a rideshare, wearing a cream coat that caught the sunlight in a way I wished it didn't. Her hair fell loosely around her shoulders, and she carried a tiny Tiffany bag, the kind that made my chest constrict. She smiled at Cole. Cole smiled at her. And just like that, a piece of my heart cracked. Not loudly but quietly, like ice breaking under soft pressure. Julia whispered, "Oh, sweetheart." I couldn't answer. My breath lodged somewhere between my ribs. The two of them started walking side by side. Cole leaned in closer, laughing softly. She touched his arm like she'd practiced it. They moved together like they'd done it many times, comfortable, intimate. "This is it," Julia murmured. "This is confirmation." It was confirmation? Yes, but it wasn't closure. It wasn't even the full truth yet. We followed them toward a cafe on the corner. We slipped inside right after they chose a table outside. Julia positioned us behind a plant that looked like it had been dying since the Bush administration. "Perfect," Julia whispered. "We're invisible." "We're 2 women crouching behind a plant," I said. "Exactly. Invisible." A waiter passed us and raised an eyebrow at our suspicious posture. Julia straightened and smiled confidently. "We're doing a botanical study," she told him. He nodded politely, deciding he didn't get paid enough to ask questions. Outside, Cole fed Sienna a bite of cheesecake, the same way he had fed me during our anniversary dinner at the River Cafe years ago. The familiarity of the gesture made my eyes sting. I blinked hard, looking away. And that's when comedy decided to intervene in the darkest moment possible. A bold pigeon swooped down like a feathery bandit and plucked a piece of croissant straight out of Sienna's hand. She gasped, shrieked, almost fell backward off her chair. Cole jumped up like he'd been tasered. Julia covered her mouth, shoulders shaking. "I swear," she whispered, "that pigeon is working for us." I tried not to laugh. I truly tried, but the absurdity broke through the ache. A tiny, reluctant laugh slipped out, surprising even me. When the chaos died down and the waiter chased away the pigeon with a napkin, Cole and Sienna gathered their things and stood up. She fixed her coat. He brushed crumbs off his shirt with the same hand he used to touch my cheek just a day earlier. Then they walked away, together. Close, deliberate. I watched their silhouettes fade around the corner. I didn't cry, not yet. The grief sat inside me like quiet thunder, waiting for its moment. Julia reached for my hand. "Sweetheart, I'm proud of you. Not for being strong, but for being honest with yourself." I swallowed hard, nodding. "What now?" "Now," she said, tightening her grip, "we get the whole truth." And for the first time since finding the receipt, I realized something. I wasn't afraid of the truth anymore. I was ready for it. The walk back to my apartment felt longer than usual, like the sidewalks had stretched just to force me into thinking. Not that I needed help, my mind was spinning so fast it could have powered the subway system. Julia stayed quiet beside me until we reached the lobby. She'd learned after decades of friendship that some silences need to breathe before they break. But the elevator doors barely closed before she turned to me and said, "Okay, now we investigate properly." "Properly?" I asked. She nodded with the seriousness of a general preparing troops. "We go digital." Back in my kitchen, she opened her laptop. A tiny, ancient thing that wheezed loudly whenever she typed too fast. She called it her cyber warrior. I called it a fire hazard. "We need passwords," she said, cracking her knuckles. I'm 61 years old, but in that moment I felt like a teenager about to sneak into the principal's office. "Julia, I can't hack my own husband." "Honey, it's not hacking if he reused his password." I stared at her. "He wouldn't be that careless." Julia lifted one eyebrow. "The man books hotel rooms with receipts that fall out during laundry. Trust me. He's careless." She pointed at Cole's iPhone, charging on the kitchen counter. "Try the anniversary date." I did. It didn't work. "Try the dog's birthday," she said. "We never had a dog." "Well, that explains his personality." After a few more failed attempts, I sighed. "This is pointless." Julia crossed her arms. "If I were a mediocre man with a secret ego, what password would I use?" And then it hit me, a ridiculous, absurd possibility. I typed it in. His phone unlocked. Julia stared at me. "No, absolutely not. He did not use that." "He did," I whispered. "His password was his own name. Just his name." Julia slapped a hand over her mouth and whispered, "The narcissism is so strong I can smell it." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so I made a strange noise that was somewhere in between, a laugh-sob hybrid that should honestly be patented. We opened his messages, we opened his email, and we found it. The thread. Cole and Sienna. Hale Image Consulting. Payments, appointments, photos. Her invoices labeled branding partnership, his notes saying, "Let's keep everything under the radar for now." Julia squinted at the screen. "Branding partnership? Is she branding him? Is he branding her? Did you marry a cattle rancher?" "Julia." But then she froze. Her finger pointed to a message dated 2 days ago. "Meet me at the plaza again. Same suite. Bring the documents." My skin prickled. "Documents?" I whispered. Julia leaned closer. "Financial documents, investment documents, legal documents, something big." My pulse thudded like a drumline. Just then the front door opened. Cole walked in, smiling like a man whose conscience was on vacation. He set his keys down, glanced at us, and froze when he noticed his phone in my hand. "What are you two doing?" he asked, voice tightening. My mouth dried, my breath stuck. Julia answered for me, cool as iced coffee. "Just doing a software update." He narrowed his eyes. "My phone doesn't need an update." Neither does your conscience, she muttered. What? He asked. Yoga, she said brightly, helps me say silly things. Cole walked toward us, reaching for his phone. I handed it back slowly, praying he hadn't noticed the open screen. He didn't. Of course he didn't. He was too busy checking his reflection in the microwave door. I'll be home late, he said casually. Client dinner. Julia snorted so loudly she had to fake a cough. After he left, I stood in the quiet kitchen for a long moment. Then I said it clearly. We're going to the plaza. Julia grinned. Can I wear something dramatic? You can wear whatever you want, because now we weren't following him out of fear. We were following him with purpose. And even through the ache, even through the betrayal, I felt something steady awakening inside me. A spine. A voice. A woman who'd had enough. Julia showed up at my apartment the next afternoon wearing a trench coat, oversized sunglasses, and a bright red scarf that could be spotted from a helicopter. You're dressed like a witness entering federal protection, I whispered. She waved dismissively. It's called blending in. No, it's called being visible from space. She shrugged, unfazed, and tossed me a black scarf. Wear this. It makes you look mysterious. I'm 61. At my age, mystery usually means forgetting where I put my keys. She grinned. Then you'll blend in even better. We took a rideshare to the plaza. Julia brought a tote bag filled with essentials, which turned out to be binoculars, almond snacks, and a notebook titled Financial Crimes and Other Fun Weekend Activities. The driver glanced at the title and slowly rolled the partition up. When we arrived, Julia paused dramatically at the entrance. I always knew I'd return to the plaza, she said softly. You've never been here. That's why it feels nostalgic. Inside, the lobby glowed in soft gold. Chandeliers shimmering, marble floors polished enough to see your future in. The place had always felt magical to me, but today it felt like standing inside the belly of a secret. We positioned ourselves at the lobby cafe with 2 cappuccinos we barely touched. From our seats, we had a clear view of the elevators and the front desk where Cole had booked the suite. Every time the elevator dinged, my heart gave a small traitorous jump. Julia nudged me. Whatever happens today, I want you to remember something. What? You deserve someone who doesn't hide things in deluxe suites. I smiled weakly. That's a low bar. Exactly. And he still tripped over it. Then, as if summoned by sarcasm, Cole appeared. He walked toward the elevators wearing a tailored blazer I hadn't seen before. He checked his phone, checked his hair, and then checked his reflection in a brass panel for good measure. Julia whispered, "The preening is strong today." But someone else stepped into the lobby a moment later. Sienna. She wore a fitted coat, hair perfect, carrying a folder under her arm. My throat tightened. They didn't greet each other with a hug, didn't kiss, didn't do anything reckless or dramatic. They walked together with practiced familiarity, the kind that hurts more than passion. We follow. Julia murmured. We waited 30 seconds, her rule, not mine, then stood and moved toward the elevators. Julia pressed the button like it owed her money. Which floor? I asked. Easy, she said. 12. Men who think they're important always choose floors with double digits. The elevator doors closed behind us with a soft sigh. My palms were sweating. My heartbeat felt like a fist knocking on the inside of my chest. I wasn't sure if I was ready for what waited on the other side of that hallway. The doors opened onto a quiet, carpeted corridor. We stepped out carefully, like burglars with arthritis. Room 1204 was at the end. Voices drifted from the door, muffled but unmistakable. Cole's and Sienna's. Julia leaned closer. They're talking about documents. I held my breath, listening. Then a sentence floated through the gap under the door. Cole. Once everything transfers, she'll never know. She trusts me. My heart didn't just crack this time, it fractured. Julia squeezed my arm steady and fierce. This isn't just cheating, he's planning something. I swallowed hard. He's using my trust, financially. Julia nodded grimly. We need evidence. The universe, sensing our desperation, sent an opportunity. A housekeeping cart rolled toward us, pushed by a young attendant humming to herself. Julia stepped forward. Hi, sweetheart. Could we borrow a towel? My friend spilled something. The attendant handed us 2 bath towels. Julia whispered, perfect. I whispered, for what? She answered, to pretend we belong here. Before I could protest, she wrapped a towel over her arm like staff and marched toward room 1204. We're 61 and 63, I hissed. We're not undercover agents. Of course we are, she said. We're undercover in life. We reached the door and pressed our ears gently, very gently, against it. Then everything inside the room went silent. Julia's eyes widened. They heard us. Footsteps approached. My pulse roared in my ears. Julia grabbed my hand. We run, she whispered, and suddenly 2 older women sprinting down a luxury hotel hallway became the most ridiculous and strangely liberating moment of my life. I didn't know 2 women in their 60s could run that fast, but fear and fury are better than cardio. We reached the elevator just as one of the doors began to close, and Julia flung herself at it, wedging her tote bag in the gap like a heroic, slightly unhinged bookend. The doors bounced open. We stumbled inside, panting like marathoners who forgot to train. Do you think they saw us? I gasped. Julia pressed every button on the panel, floors 2 through 14, turning the elevator into a confused metal Christmas tree. If they did, she wheezed, we're creating a diversion. This isn't a diversion. This is chaos. Chaos is a form of diversion. The elevator began stopping at every single floor. At floor 9, a confused businessman stepped in, stared at us, stared at the glowing panel of 13 lit buttons, and slowly backed out. See? Julia said proudly. Diversion. When we finally reached the lobby, we rushed out as fast as dignity allowed. Outside the plaza's grand doors, we bent over, hands on our knees, breaths loud enough to disturb passing pigeons. One gave us a look of judgment I didn't appreciate. Julia wiped her forehead. Okay, that was invigorating. That was humiliating, I corrected. Yes, she admitted, but invigoratingly humiliating. We walked to Central Park to catch our breath. The air was cool, the city humming its late afternoon rhythm. I sat on a bench, pulse still drumming under my skin. Julia sat beside me, her expression shifting from comedic panic to gentle concern. You heard what he said, she whispered. Transfers, trust, documents. He's not just cheating on you emotionally, he's planning something with your finances. I stared at the trees swaying lightly in the breeze, feeling strangely steady despite everything. I know, and we almost got caught. I know that too. We need help, she continued. Real help. I turned to her. What kind? She straightened, eyes shining with purpose. My nephew. He's a cybersecurity specialist. He hacks things for a living. Legally, mostly. Mostly? She waved a hand. We don't need details. My phone buzzed, a text from Cole. Working late. Don't wait up for dinner. I stared at the screen. The lie was so casual now, so rehearsed. Julia peeked at my phone. He has no idea what's coming. That alone is almost therapeutic. But then, because the universe enjoys irony, a street performer nearby started singing a dramatic love ballad, loudly, completely off-key. The universe has a sense of humor I'll never fully understand. The singer looked straight at me while belting a high note that cracked like old floorboards. Julia leaned over and whispered, Is this man serenading you? I groaned. Please no. He took it as encouragement and came closer. Julia cried out, Sir, she's going through something. Use your powers elsewhere. He backed away, bewildered, but not before shouting, Love always wins. Julia yelled back, Not today. And somehow, I laughed. Really laughed. The kind that shakes your shoulders and surprises your heart. It felt like my body remembered joy for the first time in days. When the laughter faded, I inhaled deeply. Call your nephew. By that evening, we were sitting in my living room with Julia's nephew, Marlo, a thin, soft-spoken man in his 30s who arrived with a backpack full of devices and the social confidence of a houseplant. He adjusted his glasses. So, you believe your husband is, committing financial misconduct? Yes, I said steadily. An emotional fraud, Julia added. Marlo nodded politely. I specialize in digital forensics. I can monitor his transactions, clone his email activity, flag unusual transfers. He paused. But this is serious. If he's funneling money, you need legal protection. Julia looked at me. Ready? I nodded. Marlo opened his laptop, a high-powered machine that looked like it belonged in a spy movie, and began typing. As code scrolled across the screen, I felt something shift inside me. Not panic, not fear, control. For the first time since finding the receipt, I wasn't just reacting. I was preparing. Marlo typed with the confidence of a man who rarely interacts with sunlight. His fingers flew across the keyboard, while Julia and I sat on the couch like 2 grandmothers watching a space launch. Every few minutes he muttered things like, Interesting, suspicious, oh wow, which did nothing for my blood pressure. Finally, he turned the screen toward us. Your husband's accounts are connected to 2 separate financial apps. One is legitimate, the other looks like a shell. A shell, I asked. A company created for hiding money, he explained carefully. Named Hale Image Consulting LLC, Julia groaned. Of course she named it after herself. The ego, I swallowed hard. So he's moving our money into her business? Not all of it, Marlowe said cautiously, but enough that it's concerning. Concern wasn't the right word. Betrayal was. And this time it wasn't emotional, it was strategic. My heart thudded heavily in my chest, but before fear could settle too deeply, Marlowe added, the good news is, I can track everything in real time now. Julia clapped like he'd announced free cheesecake. Brilliant. We have our own digital guard dog. Marlowe blinked. I guess? An alert pinged. We all jumped. It's a location update, he said. Cole's phone had just arrived at 5th Avenue. 5th Ave? Julia gasped. Is he cheating or shopping? Honestly, both are crimes at his income level. I stood slowly, grabbing my coat. We're going. Julia was already halfway to the door. Let's catch him before he buys her something expensive. I can tolerate infidelity, but not gifting irresponsibly. We rushed downstairs and flagged a taxi. The driver was a cheerful older man who smelled faintly of cinnamon and played jazz at a volume that shook my ribcage. Where to, ladies? He asked. 5th Avenue, Julia answered, pointing dramatically like she was giving directions in a spy film. He nodded. Ah, shopping day? Julia muttered. Not exactly, surveillance. The driver blinked at us through the rearview mirror. Should I, lower the music? No, she said. It adds mood. We arrived near a row of luxury stores. Tiffany, Cartier, a boutique I couldn't even pronounce. The street shimmered with holiday lights even though it wasn't close to a holiday. Manhattan always found an excuse to sparkle. Marlowe's tracker pinged again. He's inside Cartier, he texted. Julia inhaled sharply. Oh no. That man better not be buying her jewelry with community property. We hurried across the sidewalk and pressed ourselves against the boutique's window like 2 women auditioning for America's Most Confused Detectives. Inside, Cole stood at a counter, holding a velvet box. My stomach sank. He's really doing it, I whispered. Julia squinted. Do you think it's a necklace or earrings? Wait, no, that box shape? I swear if it's a ring. And then something unexpected happened. The salesperson opened the box. Inside it wasn't jewelry. It was a Mont Blanc pen. Julia blinked. A pen? He's cheating and boring? But then another figure stepped into view. Sienna. She slipped an arm around his waist. Cole lifted the pen proudly. It's perfect, she said, smiling up at him. Julia whispered, they're celebrating something. A deal maybe. A contract. This isn't romance. This is conspiracy. My heart squeezed. It didn't hurt the way earlier sightings hurt. This time the pain was quieter, deeper. The pain of realizing the betrayal wasn't just emotional or financial. It was collaborative, planned, intentional. The kind of betrayal that requires both deceit and confidence. And Cole had always had too much confidence. As they turned toward the register, Julia tapped my arm urgently. We need proof. How? I whispered. Follow them. But act normal. Julia's version of normal was questionable, but I nodded anyway. When they exited the store, we trailed behind them discreetly. Or at least we tried. At one point, a street vendor shouted, "Sunglasses for $5." And Julia reflexively yelled back, "Not now, this is official business." Cole paused, looked around briefly, then kept walking. Julia froze. Did he see us? No, I whispered. He's too busy admiring his pen. They entered a cafe. We approached the window slowly, pressing close enough to see but far enough not to be seen. Inside, Sienna handed him a folder. Cole leaned in. Once this is signed, everything shifts. Everything shifts. Everything shifts. The words echoed in my chest like a warning bell. Julia took my hand. This is bigger than cheating. I nodded, feeling my spine straighten. This is fraud, I said quietly. And for the first time, the fear inside me didn't grow. It receded. Because truth wasn't destroying me. It was preparing me. We walked away from the cafe slowly, as if any sudden movement might shatter the thin shell of composure I was clinging to. The city buzzed around us, horns, chatter, footsteps on pavement, yet everything felt muted, like someone had turned the volume down just enough for me to hear my own heartbeat. Julia squeezed my arm. You okay? No, I admitted. But I'm not falling apart either. I think that counts for something. It counts for everything, she said. Still, the weight of what we'd seen pressed hard on my chest. A fraudulent contract, financial transfers, the Mont Blanc pen, symbolic, arrogant, almost ceremonial. It wasn't just cheating, it was strategy, intent, a deliberate removal of my place in the life I helped build. We needed more than glimpses, we needed evidence, solid, unshakable, courtroom-worthy evidence. Marlowe messaged us, tracking active, email flagged, suspicious document drafted this morning. I typed back, "Can you pull it?" He responded instantly, "Already in progress. Might take a few minutes. Starbucks Wi-Fi unstable." Julia frowned. "Why is he at Starbucks?" "He likes the atmosphere," I said. "He likes the outlets," Julia corrected. We walked toward a quieter side street, away from Fifth Avenue's glitter. My mind raced with questions. What documents were they signing? What did everything shifts mean? How long had this been happening? How blind had I been? Julia stopped abruptly. "We need food." "I'm not hungry." "You say that now," she said, linking her arm through mine, "but I refuse to investigate on an empty stomach. I'm 63, not indestructible." She led us into a small diner, a cozy place smelling faintly of coffee and butter. The waitress took one look at us, two exhausted older women clutching emotional chaos, and said, "Honey, this booth has extra cushions. Sit there." Bless her. We slid into the booth. Julia ordered fries for strategic thinking. I ordered tea. While we waited, she leaned forward. "Let's talk next steps." Before she could continue, the waitress returned, with fries mountain-sized enough to qualify as a geological formation. Julia stared. "Ma'am, this is not what I expected." The waitress winked. "Rough days require big servings." Julia whispered reverently, "She's a sage." I almost laughed despite everything. Marlowe's next message arrived, pulled draft. Looks like a transfer of marital assets into Hale LLC. Signature line prepared for Cole and you. My stomach twisted. "He forged my signature?" Julia read the message, jaw tightening. "He prepared a line for you, not necessarily forged, yet." I stared at my tea as if the steam might answer questions I didn't dare ask aloud. Then, another ping. Also found emails. They planned to present it as a joint investment opportunity. If you questioned anything, they'd claim it was for tax benefits. The diner blurred slightly around the edges. He wasn't just betraying me. He was preparing to outsmart me. Julia grabbed my hands. "Listen to me. You're not losing anything. Not your money, not your dignity, not your future. Not on my watch." I nodded slowly. "I want justice, Julia." "You're going to get justice," she said firmly, "and maybe a settlement that buys a beach house." That earned a small grin from me, preferably one without pigeons. We finished the fries and left the diner, just as Marlowe called. His voice was urgent. "He's on the move again." "Where?" I asked. "Uptown," he said. "Looks like he's heading to a notary office." Julia inhaled sharply. "A notary? Oh no, not today." A notary meant signatures. Signatures meant contracts. Contracts meant irreversible consequences. "We have to stop him," I said. "We will," Julia replied. And gracefully, well, semi-gracefully, I'm wearing heels. We rushed to the curb and flagged a taxi. The driver leaned out the window. "Where to?" Julia answered without hesitation. "Follow that betrayal." The driver blinked. "Is that an address?" I gave the actual location. As the taxi sped forward, Manhattan lights streaked by in long golden lines. My pulse synced with the city's rhythm, fast, pounding, determined. I wasn't just chasing the truth anymore. I was chasing justice. And I was getting closer. The taxi jolted over a pothole with enough force to make Julia clutch the door handle like we were entering low orbit. "New York really needs to fix its infrastructure," she muttered. The driver said, "Ma'am, that wasn't a pothole. That was a shadow." "Well then, New York needs better lighting," she fired back. I pressed a hand to my chest, trying to calm my heartbeat. My pulse wasn't slowing, not when we were minutes away from Cole possibly signing my financial life away. Marlowe updated us again. He stopped 2 blocks from the notary office. Parked, sitting in the car, might be reviewing documents. Julia frowned. "Reviewing? What does he need to review? He's been planning this for months." "He's probably rehearsing his lies," I said quietly. The taxi pulled up near the corner. We got out, blending into the early evening crowd. Manhattan glowed around us, streetlights flickering on, yellow cabs honking. The air full of possibility even when your heart was breaking. "There," Julia pointed. Cole's silver Mercedes sat at the curb. Inside, he leaned forward over a folder. The same one Sienna had given him in the cafe. He looked focused, intent, determined. It was strange, watching the man I married plot the future of his life without me in it. A life where my signature was just a tool, my trust just an entry point, my love just collateral damage. I inhaled, steady and unsure and hurting all at once. Julia squeezed my arm. We need to get closer. Closer? He'll see us. That's why we use stealth, she said. You're wearing a bright red scarf, I reminded her. She stared down at it. Huh. Forgot about that. Still, we approached from behind a row of parked cars, crouching just enough to feel ridiculous but not enough to attract attention. Julia's knees cracked loudly. She froze. If he hears my joints before he sees me, I'm going to be offended. But Cole stayed focused on the paperwork, unaware that two older women were tailing him with the determination of underpaid detectives. Then came a twist neither of us expected. A tall man in a navy suit approached the passenger side of the Mercedes. He tapped the window. Cole let him in. Julia whispered, "Who the hell is that?" The man opened a briefcase. I leaned forward, my pulse roared. Inside were documents, stacks of them, along with a notary stamp. He brought the notary to him, Julia gasped. Unbelievable, he's cheating on you and doing drive-through legal fraud. They talked quietly, too quietly for us to hear. Then it happened. The notary pointed to a line. Cole lifted his pen. The Mont Blanc. My breath caught. He was about to sign. A signature that could transfer assets. A signature that could trap me legally. A signature that could change everything. I panicked. Not loudly, just internally, like a kettle boiling silently. Julia, I can't let him sign. No, she whispered, her tone sharpening into something fierce. You cannot. But how do we stop him? She scanned the street, evaluating, calculating. And then, with the confidence of a woman who's made many questionable decisions and survived them all, she said, "We create a distraction." Before I could argue, she darted out from behind the parked cars, fast enough to shock me, slow enough to still look her age, and marched straight toward the Mercedes. She didn't approach the driver's side or the passenger side. No, she stood directly in front of the car. I hissed, "Julia, what are you doing?" The notary and Cole both looked up. Julia slapped her hands dramatically on the hood. "Sir, your car is—" She paused, searching her brain, leaking something. Cole threw his door open. "What? What's leaking?" Julia gasped. "A suspicious liquid." "What liquid?" She leaned in, squinting at the front bumper, like she was inspecting a medical patient. An ominous one. People started turning, watching, whispering. New Yorkers rarely look up from their phones, so this was impressive. Cole crouched beside her, trying to see what she was seeing. Meanwhile, the notary stepped out, confused. I took my chance. Heart pounding, I walked quickly but quietly to the passenger side. The door was still ajar. On the seat lay the folder. My fingers trembled as I grabbed it. Every page, every draft, every contract. Evidence. Proof. His whole scheme laid out in print. I slipped away before he looked up. Julia, seeing me retreat, gasped louder. "Never mind. False alarm. It's just rainwater." "It didn't rain today," Cole snapped. "Sir," she said gravely, "New York weather is emotionally unstable." And with that, she marched off as if nothing happened. We didn't stop moving until we were half a block away. My hands shook around the folder. Julia panted. "Did you get it?" I opened the flap. Yes. And for the first time that day, fear didn't rise inside me. Power did. I didn't sleep that night, but not from fear. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something new running beneath my skin. Direction. Purpose. Momentum. The folder lay open on my dining table under the warm glow of the pendant light. Every page, every fraudulent clause, every forged signature line, clear as day now. Julia hovered beside me, wearing reading glasses that made her look like an angry librarian in a crime show. "This," she said, tapping a page, "is enough to roast him legally, emotionally, financially, and spiritually." I exhaled shakily. "But is it enough for court?" Julia grinned, slow and triumphant. "Oh, sweetheart, with a good attorney, this is the Avengers of evidence." Right on cue, my phone buzzed. "Marlowe, found more. Emails prove coordination with Sienna. Timeline matches asset movement. This is criminal." My pulse froze. Criminal. Not just divorce-worthy. Not just betrayal. A crime. Julia clapped her hands once. "Then we take this to an attorney." We met with one the next morning, a sharp, calm woman in her 40s named Serena Caldwell. Her office overlooked Park Avenue, the kind of place where deals were made and lives were rebuilt. Serena reviewed the documents silently, flipping pages with the precision of a surgeon. Finally, she looked up. "Mrs. Sanders, your husband is committing financial fraud, marital asset theft, and attempted forgery." Hearing the words spoken aloud sent a cold rush down my spine. "Can we stop him?" I whispered. Serena's lips curved into a confident smile. "Not only can we stop him, we can freeze every account he has touched before he wakes up tomorrow." Julia punched the air softly. "Yes, freeze the man like leftover lasagna." Serena blinked. "I suppose that's one way to put it." Within hours, the motions were filed. A judge reviewed the evidence electronically. Marlowe's logs, email chains, the notary interaction, the drafts Cole never expected anyone else to see. By evening, Serena texted, "Approved. All accounts frozen, notary flagged, investigation opened." I stared at the words, barely breathing. Julia squeezed my shoulders. "Tomorrow is going to be, oh, how do I say this kindly? Delicious." The next morning, fate delivered a show worthy of Broadway. Cole burst into the apartment, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. His hair was messy, his tie crooked, his face red with fury. "What did you do?" he shouted. I stayed calm. "Good morning." "Don't play games, Maggie. My accounts are frozen, every card declined, even my business account." "Yes," I said softly. "I know." "You, what? You froze everything." "No," I corrected gently. "The judge did." He stared at me like I'd spoken another language. "Judge? What judge?" "The one reviewing your attempted transfer of marital assets," I said. "And your fraudulent contracts, and the emails, and the shell company." His face drained of color. "You?" He pointed at me, shaking. "You went through my things?" Julia appeared from behind the kitchen island like a comedic guardian angel. "Actually, I went through your things." She just held the emotional support biscotti. Cole spun toward her. You're behind this," she shrugged. "I've been behind many things. This is my proudest." Before he could speak again, a firm knock sounded. Serena stepped inside with 2 officers. "Cole Sanders, you're under investigation for financial misconduct. Please come with us." Cole stuttered. "You can't. This is all a misunderstanding. I'm Maggie, tell them." For the first time in months, I looked at him without pain, without fear, without blindness. "You told her?" I said quietly, "that I trusted you, that I'd never know, that everything would shift once the documents were signed." His mouth fell open. "You were right," I continued. "Everything did shift." The officers approached. Cole backed away like a cornered animal, but it was useless. They cuffed him gently, professionally. As they escorted him out, he looked at me one last time. Not smug, not charming, small. When the door finally shut, I felt the strangest sensation, something leaving my body, something heavy and cold and long overstayed. Julia exhaled. "Darling, you did it." I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I walked to the window. The Manhattan skyline glowed softly, steady and bright, like it had been waiting for me to return to myself. "Julia," I whispered, "I think I'm free." She hugged me, squeezing tight. "You're more than free, you're beginning." I didn't recognize my life at first. The silence in my apartment felt different now. Not hollow, but peaceful, like a room finally exhaling after holding its breath too long. I brewed myself a cup of chamomile tea, opened the windows, and let the soft morning air drift through the curtains. For the first time in years, I didn't check my phone for excuses, delays, or half-hearted apologies. There was no one left to disappoint me. And somehow, that brought comfort I didn't expect. I spent the following weeks slowly reclaiming pieces of myself I had set aside during the marriage. I took morning walks in Central Park, letting my joints warm up with the sun. I began painting again. Soft coastal landscapes on large canvases that filled my living room with color. I read books I had forgotten I owned. I went to the cafe on the corner and ordered pastries without thinking of whether someone else preferred something different. One afternoon, while browsing a small art gallery in Soho, I met him. Robert, a widowed architect with kind eyes, silver hair, and a gentle voice that felt like stepping into warm light. He stood beside me quietly as we admired the same ocean painting. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said. I nodded. "It feels like hope." He smiled at that, and somehow it didn't feel strange to smile back. We talked for an hour, about architecture, about losing ourselves and finding ourselves again, about the way Manhattan sunsets always feel like promises. He didn't rush, he didn't charm, he didn't perform, he simply listened. And I realized how long it had been since someone listened to me without needing anything in return. In the weeks that followed, we met again. Walks, coffee, quiet conversations. Nothing dramatic, nothing rushed. Just two people remembering that companionship can be gentle, not heavy. Trust can be slow, not demanded. Love, if it arrives, can feel like soft waves, not crashing storms. One evening, as we stood by the river watching the city lights twinkle across the water, he asked, "Do you ever feel like life begins twice?" I breathed in deeply, letting the cool air settle in my lungs. "Yes," I said. "I think mine is beginning right now." For the first time in a long time, my heart didn't feel broken. It felt open. And that was enough.